In this video, I will show how I do a background wash with natural sienna watercolor. Thanks for watching. This is a small quill brush. I want something that's the scale where that tip will be able to get in between the leaves and stems of this plant. Controlling the amount of water on your brush is really important for doing this. You want there to be enough paint in your brush so that you can cover a large area all at once, but you don't want so much water that you can't control it. I find it's always helpful to start in a place where you're not going to notice a dry line, because you're almost always going to get some kind of a dry line by the time you get all the way around. I'm going to start here and go clockwise around. So just starting here where the dry line is not going to be obvious, I'm going to just go close to the edge of the image with my brush, but I'm not letting water cross that line. You can see I've already got a little bit of a dry line there. I might go back and wet it occasionally. Now while this is wet, I can still add a little bit of color. I'm going to try to just do this as quickly as I can. So I'm not going to worry too much about the color for the moment. I'm just going into this area really lightly with the tip of my brush. I have plenty of paint on the brush, but by just using the tip I can control it. And then this I can just pull in and out really easily. If I go over the line a little bit, it doesn't matter. It really, if I'm doing it quickly enough, I'm not going to pull enough paint out of the image to really affect things. So all of this is still wet. I'm going to add just a little bit more paint just by pushing down a little bit more, pulling this out to the edge like this. What I'm trying to do throughout is keeping this edge wet. So it won't matter much if this dries out, but I want to make sure that the working edge stays wet so that I don't get lots of dry lines. Now you might want lots of dry lines. It creates interest, and you might have noticed that sometimes my backgrounds have dry lines in them. I don't consider it to be a flaw, but just to show you how you can get a really even background. Now I'm feeling that my brush is a little bit dry, and I keep this wet. I'm just going to go back in to get more paint on my brush. Before I go in close to my image, I'm just going to add a little bit more color out here. Again, making sure that this edge does not dry out. Here I'm taking this down first before I go in. This I'm going to do later, but I'm just going to pull this out now. I want this to be a similar color to what's on the other side. So after I make sure I have this wet, I'm just going to go back in quickly and add a little bit of my background color here next to my image. Now, if you ever feel like you've got too much water or paint in a particular spot, you can always take a dry brush and just stick a dry brush there, and your dry brush will absorb some of the water. My edge here is starting to dry out, so I'm going to go back over here. And again, it doesn't matter if I touch the edge a little bit. The green paint is dry, So if I'm moving quickly enough, I'll be away from that green edge before that green paint has a chance to bleed into my background wash. Okay, so I'm almost done. Didn't take very long. And here's my edge. So I picked a spot where a dry line won't matter very much. I can even just go across the page a little bit there to make the bottom edge a little bit more interesting. And then I'm just going in with the tip of my quill brush to add a little bit of background there in the middle. And that's it. That is it. I'm happy with it. You can see I got a little bit of variation here. This is a really light dry line here, but that doesn't bother me at all. I think it just makes it look a little bit more interesting. Just in the, we always want to embrace imperfection a little bit, because really it's these little imperfections that make it look like this is something that was done by hand, and that's what you're going for. So that's it. And I'm going to stop, because the more I fuss like this, the more I will get additional dry lines. I think it's really just best to do it and stop.